We begin in Ukraine. The UN reports more than 5 million refugees have fled the country since the start of the conflict.
And today, the mayor of Mariupol is calling on residents to evacuate along a humanitarian corridor agreed upon with Russia. But Russian forces are attempting to advance toward the city of Zaporizhzhia, which is on a route that forms part of the corridor. Tens of thousands of civilians remain in Mariupol. Many Ukrainian soldiers and civilians in the port city are trapped inside a steel plant being bombed by Russian forces.
Russia has confirmed a new phase in its invasion that has begun in the east. The country's foreign minister says the goal is to achieve, quote, full liberation of the Donetsk and Luhansk republics. Joining us now from Kyiv is CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay. Chris, a couple of questions to start off here. Many humanitarian corridors from Mariupol have previously failed. So can we expect the one today to work? And tell us what the latest is on how those Ukrainians are faring in that steel plant.
Yeah, it's a great question about being able to trust these humanitarian corridors actually being protected and honored by the Russian military. So Reuters is reporting that dozens of civilians have been able to board a small convoy of buses and flee the city of Mariupol. That is a small number of people compared to the 6,000 they were hoping to get out of the city today. That's according to the city council of Mariupol, so we'll keep you posted on that. But you're right, the big question is, will they be safe? In the past, in Mariupol, Russian soldiers have fired upon these supposedly safe pathways out of the city for civilians. You have to keep in mind, this is a city that's been under siege for weeks. The very same soldiers had been trapping the civilians in the city. Many of them died not from shrapnel or from gunshot wounds, but from starvation and lack of water. So how they can trust the soldiers today, I mean, frankly, they don't have much trust in them, but they don't have much else to depend on. As far as that steel mill is concerned, the scene continues to grow more and more apocalyptic. Yet another ultimatum, another deadline has come and gone for those soldiers to surrender or die. The soldiers who are holed up inside of there. In fact, they've pleaded to the international community to put pressure on Russia to let them leave because they feel like they're utterly trapped. They say they're outnumbered 10-1. Once again, there's an example of Ukrainian soldiers having no reason to trust the Russian soldiers who keep giving them these ultimatums, telling them that they could leave and they'll survive. But again, considering how they've been treated in the past, they have absolutely no reason to trust them.
What a horrible and harrowing situation to be in. And Chris, so this new phase of the war has begun in the east. How are Russian forces faring in those regions?
Well, it's too soon to tell. I mean, we do know that they have launched a full-out invasion, a full-out offensive, stretching the front line, which is sort of a boomerang shape across eastern Ukraine, stretching about 300 miles. So it's really big, and it's to be determined how effective it's going to be. Now, Russia being in this part of Ukraine does offer them some advantages that they haven't had up until now because eastern Ukraine is right on the border with Russia. So it gives Russia shorter supply lines. One of the main reasons they were bogged down here in Kyiv and in northern Ukraine was because those supply lines were so long. You remember that those images of that long convoy of Russian military not getting anywhere. They were bogged down in the sludge, in the mud, and it was just such a vast distance. They weren't able to resupply their soldiers quickly enough. Theoretically, they won't have that same problem going into this part of the conflict. Another advantage it gives them is it's much more of an open warfare type of scenario, whereas here in Kyiv and in the surrounding area, it was urban conflict. So imagine a suburb situation similar to what we have in the United States, where you have houses, you have subdivisions, you have a business area, all of these things offering places for Ukrainian soldiers to hide and pop up with those Javelin missile launchers, those anti-tank weapons that have been so effective up until now. In this part of Ukraine, it's it's much more of an open warfare situation where you're going to have tanks going head-to-head, heavy artillery, all of which Russia has much more of. Nevertheless, we're told by sources at the Pentagon that the maintenance of their vehicles, it shows no sign of being any better than it was when they used those same vehicles that had been poorly maintained going into Kyiv in the earlier weeks of the war. So it could very well be the case that we're giving the Russians too much credit and overestimating their might. So it's something that we're simply going to have to wait and see. Whereas the Ukrainian soldiers, especially in eastern Ukraine, they've been dug in deep there since 2014 when the Russian army supported a separatist movement there. And these are some of Ukraine's best fighters. And as I mentioned, they've been getting resupplied by NATO allies and the United States with more and more heavy artillery. Not as much as they like. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine says we need more and more, and he said he's had to repeat himself so many times now, he's starting to feel like Bill Murray in Groundhog's Day. But it's definitely a big fight, head-to-head combat. Ukraine says the likes of which we haven't seen since World War II.
All right, Chris Livesay reporting for us from Kyiv. Thank you very much.